When my son asked me if he could be involved in professional sport, I said yes, of course you can. And he said how? He said there's no one in sport who has any of the challenges that I do. My aim was to find these athletes, coaches, professionals, and interview them and share their stories so that we can show the world what is beyond perception. Welcome. We are joined today by Tui and Louisa, who are from the Brain Charity. Ladies, it's great to have you on board with us, and it's great to talk to you today. I guess first question would be can you tell us a little bit about yourselves and what your roles are within the charity?
My name's Tui. I am Head of Communications and Fundraising at the Brain Charity. Manage our fundraising team and our communications team. Obviously, the fundraising team is tasked with bringing in the money that keeps the charity running, so we don't receive any sort of standard statutory funding from the government, local authority or NHS. We might sometimes get funding for one specific project or service, but across the board, the money that we need to run the charity and provide our services comes from donors, people taking on marathons for us, people leaving gifts in their wills, corporate companies that work with us. We have businesses like our Neurodiversity training that we use to bring in income. I look after the team that generates all that money, and then the other side of my role is the communication. So that's all the ways we talk about the charity and our brand and who we are and what we do. So it includes things like our website, social media, press and media opportunities, videos, physical leaflets, and obviously doing things like this today, this podcast, being able to spread the word about the Brain Charity.
Thank you very much. And Louisa?
I'm Louisa. I'm a physio that works here at the Brain Charity, and funded by, as Stu was saying, the generous donations and bits that we get and support that we have for the charity to run a service here. And I work alongside our Neuro-Gym, which is a free-to-access gym that's accessible for anybody with any neurological condition, as is the physiotherapy. The mission is just to get people as active as possible and try and provide a space that accommodates for people with different needs, whether it's physical or cognitive, speech, any way that they're affected by their neurological conditions.
I was just explaining to Greg all the facilities that you guys have, and when you were positioning the poster, I was just showing them, that's the Neuro-Gym, and just explaining how it was really nice when I went there and how everything is specialized for different needs, and how just the whole charity is so warm and welcoming as well. So thank you again for joining. I was wondering, first thing that also our listeners wanted to ask, this might be more towards Tui, if someone does need any kind of help or need, what is the approach, what is the process that happens after they reach out to you guys?
Depends which area of the Brain Charity they've reached out to. So we sort of split our services into three core areas. So we have practical help, which is information and advice, support for carers, just any questions people might have on life with a new diagnosis or a neurological condition. Welfare benefits is a really big one there as well. Then we have emotional support, which is free counselling, confidence coaching, which links with employability, support groups, and then social activities. So we put the Neuro-Gym as part of that social activities bracket because, as Louisa said, there's really amazing physical and mental health benefits to exercise, but we also see the really lovely communities that are created when we bring like-minded people together. And it's so important for us for this to be a safe space. Part of that, we also have our Brain Food Cafe, which is downstairs in our centre, and we run different social activities. So when people get in touch with us, they might just get in touch via our website, or they might call us, in which case it will sort of go to our main centralised email system, and then we really sort of triage people to the right place. So most inquiries go via our info and advice team initially, because they're best placed to sort of provide, the right information on where someone might need to go. And I think what's quite unique about us as a charity is people might come initially to see Louisa or for the Neuro-Gym, but then they'll end up having a coffee in the cafe, and then they'll speak to someone and they'll arrange to come to one of our social activities, or they'll book in a meeting with info and advice to ask about benefits. And we are very person-centred, so we'll walk with that person as long as they need our support, you know, doing whatever really is sort of their key priority. So it doesn't have to be that you come in and you only do this one thing. We're very open and flexible. Obviously, some of our services do have waiting lists. That's just the reality of, you know, running a charity where there's always going to be more need and more demand than we can keep up with. So that's why we encourage people that, yeah, if they are like local, they can come into our centre in Merseyside. Like the cafe is open and free, and you know, people can access that and just sit and nurse a cup of tea all day and use our Wi-Fi and have like a warm, welcoming space. There's no sort of pressure there. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's how it works.
Perfect. When it comes to the Neuro-Gym and like the social activities, this could be possibly a question for both as well. What are the different approaches that you take with different individuals when it comes to their neurological condition as well?
Like our whole sort of thing as a charity is that people can be affected by different neurological conditions, and you know, there's such a wide range, there's more than 600 because the brain is so complex, but the way they impact on people's lives can be quite similar. So in terms of, you know, isolation, mental health, the risk of poverty, you know, often like differences in sort of families. If someone, say, had a brain injury, it can really change their personality. Those types of themes can be the same regardless of which condition someone has, and you know, the sort of stigma that they might experience. So that's why we try and make all of our services as broad as possible across all neurological conditions, because we don't provide like medical advice. We're not a medical charity in that sense. So our staff wouldn't be able to say, oh, you've been diagnosed with this, here's what your like prognosis or your treatment will look like. But what we can do is say, we'll come, you know, and talk to other people who they might not have the same condition as you, but they might have experienced something similar in their life, or a lot of the advice we can give is going to be applicable regardless. But I feel like for the Neuro-Gym and physio, it might get a little bit more specific.
Sort of, yeah. I would agree that we know that people with neurological conditions are often affected in the same way, so we wouldn't isolate people based on their condition to say only you can access this. It's definitely a let's get everybody involved. But I think from a exercise and what's safe for people to do, we would consider more restrictions from a condition perspective. But I would say we take a very positive approach of more of a focus on what can we get you involved in, what suits you, what can we set up. Even from an environmental perspective, we have times in our Neuro-Gym where we have like quiet hour, we don't have the music on, we have the lights down, and that allows people to come and then engage in physio, engage in activity that suits them. So I would agree it's still person-centred, and we can hopefully open that conversation with them when they come and suit what they need, really.
Perfect. Just following up on that as well with about physical activity, go in as much as detail as you want. Could you describe to our listeners and also to us as well, how does physical activity benefit individuals with a neurological condition?
Physical activity helps with more or less every neurological condition in so many different ways. From the obvious of their physical fitness, we know that a lot of our clients struggle to get back into activity or even to begin with activity, whether that's formal exercise and using a gym or just moving their bodies more. That can be a real issue for them. Physical activity to keep their general health well is important, as it is for everybody. But in addition to that, if you're dealing with complex health conditions, everything can kind of play on each other as well. So we want to keep you well in every sense. If we think about people who have had a stroke, for example, they may get a certain time limit in the NHS services of how much rehab, how much physio they can receive. But there is a time, unfortunately, that rehab has to finish, and they then take on kind of the rest of their rehab journey with less support. So that's where we hope to kind of step in and continue that journey for the rest of their life. As Tu was saying before, we meet people on their journey and we're with them for as long as they need us. So some people might come to exercise and enjoy those kind of health benefits a year after their stroke or 10 years after their stroke, and that will still continue to have positive benefits for them for the rest of their life. We know that conditions can be difficult to manage as well, and that even if you've only recently had a diagnosis, that doesn't then mean that you know how to manage your condition for the rest of your life. When everything can happen to you, life is complex, isn't it? And we know that things continue to change. So being able to support people with physical activity to continue to maintain their health through their life is important, and hopefully something that we manage to do here. We also know so much about the mental health benefits of activity, and especially, as we've been saying, the community environment that we hope to build here really helps people with their mental health. We get all those good endorphins and things moving when we're exercising, which makes us feel better, then makes us more able to cope with the daily stresses of life, of the limitations that we know happen when you have a neurological condition and the challenges that you face in going about your day-to-day life. If we can make you more resilient for that, then that's only going to be positive. Yeah, the benefits to physical exercise with any neurological condition, whether it's physical symptoms or not, is endless.
Amazing. Perfect. Thank you. And I know, of course, this will be different for a different neurological condition, but how do you see a pattern of what kind of exercise helps individuals the most? For example, I don't know, strength training or cardio or aerobics. Is there like a pattern that you've seen, or is it a mix of everything?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think probably a mix of everything. Everybody comes with such different needs that it's whatever kind of suits them, what interests them. We know that trying to encourage people to exercise, the most important thing that we can do is find them something that they enjoy doing. So we talk quite often about activity in the Neuro-Gym. Doesn't have to be using gym equipment necessarily. It can be that we have a conversation about walking more outside and things that you're going to be able to continue doing for a long period of time. So I suppose in answer to your question, it could be any type of exercise, but we do also know that strength training and resistance training is so important for health and has a lot more health benefits than we've maybe given it airtime for before. So something that I try and encourage in our gym the most is helping people push the boundaries a bit more of where they feel comfortable exercising to. We're doing that in a safe way, obviously, but it's kind of giving people the confidence to do a bit more than they maybe would, and having that supervision sometimes gives you that little extra nudge and the pressure of somebody watching you. I try not to stand over people, but it is that way. We've got personal trainers that work in our Neuro-Gym that can help people just with that kind of consistency of resistance training, of aerobic training, that sort of thing.
And encouraging people to be courageous in, taking on new things, and knowing, we see a lot of people who think because they've had this life-changing diagnosis that is going to really limit their life. And, often conditions can be really life-limiting, and it's hard because we are the whole spectrum, from neurodiversity and like ADHD and autism all the way through to something that could be like a terminal condition. So it's a very wide spectrum, but on the whole, yeah, we try and just really encourage positivity and positive mindset.
That sounds so good. Like the way in which you're talking about trying to encourage them to be optimistic, and the way in which you try and create that environment, and it got me thinking about two things while you were talking. So the two things that it got me thinking, and I wanted to probe you a little bit on it, would be: is there a variation in the ages that you see, and does that challenge you in your roles in terms of how to get the engagement and then the optimistic sort of, and the the encouragement side? And the second part of my question was. Do you know what? In true ADHD fashion, I've completely forgot. Let's go with the first one. So, does the age? It'll come to me at some point.
Remember the first question?
Yeah, I remember the first one. That's it. So, does the ages create new challenges for you, and how do you have to overcome them or be creative around that?
I mean, in terms of our services generally, we have a service for young people, the Brain Changer Arts Project, which is for children and young adults. And we work all the way up to, we have an online programme for people living with dementia. So, not always elderly people. Dementia, as we know, can affect younger people as well. But on the whole, that cohort is older. It really does depend on the condition. We do see there's a lot of neurological conditions that are more common as people are older, things like stroke. It's relatively uncommon to have a stroke in your sort of 20s or 30s, although it does happen. But we are seeing a lot, like you mentioned, Greg, recently, of adult sort of ADHD and autism diagnoses. And I think that awareness, is massively expanding, and I think it can be really, really life-changing for people, but almost like a bit of a process of grieving what they wish they'd had as a young person. So we see so many people who say things like, I wish I'd known that it wasn't just me being crap this thing, and like they've taken it as this like personality, like negative personality trait their whole life, and then they're trying to unlearn that. I think that's something that our counselling teams see a lot as well, in terms of sort of that can be a big like thing to go through with your mental health around your identity. So that's what we're seeing a lot now. But I think because we are person-centred, we're not, a charity for old people, we're not a charity for young people, and I think we do get a really nice mix of ages, and people of any age feel welcome here. I don't know what you would think about the gym specifically.
Yeah, I would say quite a range of ages, which is really lovely as well, because I think often from an exercise point of view, you don't often get a mix of ages, generally speaking, exercising together. So that creates another kind of overlapping factor of people encouraging that each other, and and they come across people that they wouldn't have in day-to-day life, but coming here and exercising, they all kind of link in a bit more with each other.
It sounds like the psychosocial element of what happens at the charity is fundamental to what you do. And I have now remembered my question, and it links to that really well. So, but no, it generally sounds like the psychosocial part of it sounds amazing. So now I want to just consider what happens though for the people who are the carers. So, for example, so you've talked really well about how you look after those who are coming in and getting the support from yourselves. But what does the people who care for these, for the partners, for the loved ones, what do they get by being with you, and how do they access sort of the opportunities with yourself?
So a lot of the people that our counselling service work with are often carers, because I think sometimes it can be the carer who is really, taking the brunt of that emotional impact if someone has been in hospital or has had, a bit of like a life-changing diagnosis or a brain injury. So all of our services are like accessible and free for carers and family members, as well as the person with the neurological condition themselves. And the counselling service also offers like couples therapy, because that can be a really big part of that conversation. As well as that, we have a specific carers advocacy service. So this currently is only within Liverpool, because that is sort of provided like as part of the Liverpool City Council offering. But we provide advocacy for carers, so we will support carers in their role, advice around if they've got like a lot of meetings to attend or like multidisciplinary groups, basically advocating for the needs of that carer, organising respite support, all of those. Sometimes it's something as simple as like helping organise someone to mow their lawn for them or walk their dog. It's literally whatever that person needs, because unpaid carers are the absolute like backbone of the country, and there's so many people who wouldn't be able to function with their condition without the support of unpaid carers through family and friends and that sort of thing. So we realise that that's a major sort of area, and then all of our other services, so our coffee mornings and people wanting to just pop in and come and chat to someone about info and advice, or ask about benefits, entitlements, or housing, or aids and adaptations. Like all of those services apply to carers as well as the person themselves, so anyone can access that support.
That's brilliant. So what you are saying is that the charity is not just for the individual who might need the direct support, it's for the loved ones and the people around them, and it's finding ways to kind of make life as accessible and as comforting as it can be, because obviously I'm imagining you must have some, you both speak very well, but you must have some times when it's tough and it's not as easy or as comfortable as it'd like to be. So it sounds like you've definitely got a real strong understanding around how to look after the people who are all encompassed within a brain injury, like we say. So I think that's really inspirational, and I think it's so good to hear that. And I think the people of Liverpool will be incredibly fortunate enough to be able to access that. And I'm hoping by having these conversations, if we have got people in Liverpool listening and they didn't know about this, we now will have them being able to contact you and being able to get used to that. So I think it's really, really good. So thank you very much for sharing that to start with. I do want to ask a question which would link to some of our normal episodes in the podcast, which I'd like you to both answer individually if you don't mind. But to get to the position you are in now and be involved in such an inspirational charity, how did you get to that point, and what made you want to go here?
So I then, specialised working within the NHS, and then a friend of mine actually saw the job at the Brain Charity and was like, oh my gosh, this sounds like you. This sounds like exactly where you want to work. So I applied, and I was fortunate enough to get the role. Yeah, and I think the ethos of the charity is really the main driver. I think it just aligns so much with what I believe to be true about accessing exercise, having ownership over your own health, and being able to experience things in the way that people who don't have a disability do experience it. I really believe in kind of knocking down those barriers. Yeah, my career to date led me to here, and I'm very, very glad to be here.
That's lovely. I always love hearing other stories because I feel like people don't often set out to work in the charity sector. Like, definitely when I was leaving uni, it wasn't like even on my horizon at all. But I think that's lovely because it means that our workforce is so varied. You know, everyone is bringing their experience from the private sector, the public sector, you know, the NHS, corporates, and it gives us like a really wide breadth of sort of knowledge and experience. So for me, I was a journalist. So I worked as a journalist for 8 years. I did an English degree, and then I did like a professional journalism qualification after uni. I started off working at a little local paper, and then I moved to work at a press agency. So they worked internationally, sort of supplying news, features, human interest, photos and videos to international media outlets, so TV, newspapers, radio, digital, online, all of that sort of thing. And I worked in like different places in the UK and abroad for this company, and I started working with a couple of charities. So we would often get sort of organisations would come to us saying, oh, can you help us share our story? We got a couple of fairly big charities that we ended up working with. One was the Royal British Legion, and one was DKMS, which is like a bone marrow donor charity. So we were working with them to sort of share their stories and get them some high profile coverage. And one time I did a piece with like a World War II veteran who, I can't remember the exact story now, but I think he had his original poppy. So it was like a paper poppy that he was given for like the first Remembrance Day, and he still had it. He was about 100. And it ended up being on the front page of either the Telegraph or the Times. So it was featured really prominently, and the charity got some great coverage. And I just really enjoyed using my sort of journalistic skills to promote these organisations that like obviously wouldn't have as much resources. The private sector. At this point, I'd moved back to Liverpool, and I thought, oh, you know, it'd be really cool to work for a charity, but there's probably no charities, you know, national or regional charities headquartered in Liverpool that would be big enough to have like a comms role. I'll probably have to like look at moving to London or Manchester, and I just Googled charity jobs Liverpool, and the first thing that popped up was a Brain Charity head of communications and fundraising. And when I came for the interview, I just got that sense that everyone feels when they come in here, where it was so like instantly warm and welcoming. And I came out of the interview and I was like, oh, I have to work there. I have to get that job because it's like such a cool place. And yeah, I've been here 5 years, so it's gone really quickly.
Wow, that's really, really appreciate you sharing that. And I suppose the follow-up question, again, thinking to what we would normally ask our guests, would be, because we can see the passion that you've got for your job, and because we can see, again, we talk about how good and supportive your job is. We also know there'll be some tough times, and there'll be some days where it's not always as straightforward. So we would always want to ask the athletes and the coaches, would be like, who helps them and who supports them to make sure they can be at their best? And the same question would be for you guys as well, like regardless of neurodiversity or not, who helps you though to become the best versions of yourself? Because I can imagine there must be days when it gets hard, and there must be sometimes moments where it's tough, and you've also got your own lives which are also going on in the background while you're trying to be the front for the charity. So who helps you? Who helps you keep being yourselves?
We do actually have like a really good sort of employee benefits program for like the size of the charity. So we have access to like healthcare where staff can access free counselling through that. We have like a massive amount of flexibility, because we know that like a large number of our staff have a disability, have a neurological condition. So like for me, I came back from maternity leave in September after having my first baby, and that period where you first go back from work to work after you've had a baby is just like absolutely blew my mind. Couldn't remember who I was, how to do the job, baby wasn't sleeping, baby was hating nursery. It was really stressful, and I felt really lucky to work in a really supportive workplace that did allow for flexibility. And also I just think because we all have a strong awareness of neurodiversity, that then extends to just generally like a really supportive environment of like if someone's having an off day, understanding that and asking if they're okay. And yeah, so some of our staff who deal more directly with clients obviously can speak to their line manager about like specific clients or cases or issues, you know, just as like an informal sort of debrief type thing that they might be doing. And yeah, like, you know, no organisation's perfect, but I do think for the size of us, like we put quite a lot of resource into supporting sort of staff well-being, because as you say, like your staff are your like lifeline, and if you don't have the staff you don't really have the organisation. So things like training as well we try and do a lot of. I don't know what you think, Louisa.
Yeah, I would say I've experienced that the same here. Yeah, definitely getting a lot of support from colleagues, and everybody is so aware, I suppose, of being in the same field and some of the challenges that you might face. I think also having time away from work as well, from a well-being point of view, when things are getting a bit trickier or you feel like you're having a bad day, just having the space to be able to maybe talk to your family or your friends about it. I've got quite a lot of friends who are also physios, so I find that quite a helpful way of debriefing, because they kind of already understand the ins and outs of the role a bit, so they understand some of the challenges that you might face. And yeah, just like a nice listening ear.
All I was going to say was like really appreciate again you sharing that with us, and Tatjana might agree, is like we've had some really good conversations, and some of the things you were talking about regarding the if we treated everybody in almost like the same sort of way, then it'd be a lot easier for everyone in the work environment, and that's something that Tony, one of our guests, really hammered home in his interview and his podcast. He talks really well about the things that he would sometimes need for people around just to give him that bit of support are actually nothing special. It's just the awareness that asking that question or being aware of that would be really helpful. And then that got me thinking when you talk about sometimes doing the gym session without the music. Like as a genuine person who doesn't really go to the gym because the loud music, the people in there, it's just so at times off-putting. Where actually, like, you don't hear of places going, actually, it's just a silent gym. Like, but I imagine there'll be people who go in there and that will be just so intimidating to them because they can hear everything. And like, so I just found, so it was really interesting what you were saying. I think it links really well to what we on the podcast are constantly trying to ask the questions and understand. Like, effectively, we're all after the same thing. We just sometimes have a slightly different way in which we prefer to do it, or our brain processes in order to do it. But we're generally all after the same thing, aren't we?
There's like this complete misconception around reasonable adjustments that must mean, like, people always think of physical stuff and they're like, oh, we need a ramp for a wheelchair and we need like a lift for people that can't use the stairs. But actually, I think it's like 80% of disabilities are invisible. It's really high. And like the team that I manage at the Brain Charity, we have quite a high proportion of neurodivergent staff within my team. And, you know, the adjustments that I make might be as simple as like, I know that for one person, if I'm giving them a verbal instruction, they might struggle to process that. So I'll always follow it up by writing it down on our board that we use so that they can then see that task written down and refer back to it rather than me just like giving them something verbally. Or for someone else having like every Monday morning, we just have like a half-hour catch-up where we go through their key priorities for the week to help them know what to prioritise. And these aren't things that cost any money, and they're things that I think have made me a better manager of people, having to, really think about the way that I work as well, just to create a more inclusive environment. So they are, things that are so easy to implement, and that's a big part of our neurodiversity training, is telling businesses you don't have to necessarily spend a lot of money, and you can then create this environment which is way more welcoming to neurodivergent people. And not only that, you're going to get more out of your employees, like categorically, because they're going to feel more able to give their best work.
And like you said, it's more welcoming to neurodivergent people, but actually it's probably just a more welcoming environment to everybody. Yeah, I really like the way you phrase that. I think that's a really nice way to summarize that.
When it comes to the social activities and also all the individuals you have coming in the Brain Charity in general, is there a way you measure their progress? Like, for example, Louisa in the Neuro-Gym, and how they are, whatever goals they have, how are they getting closer to those goals? And
one of the most important things that I like to do in our first meeting is really understand what it is that the client's hoping to achieve with physio, because that in itself could be any number of things. So we'll have some clients that want to be able to turn over more easily in bed, and then some clients that would like to run a marathon or be able to walk around the shops or get themselves dressed. Any goal is a reasonable goal, and there's so many different routes that we can take to get there. So I think determining what success looks like first means we need to determine what do we want to achieve, where are we aiming for, and then taking the necessary steps in the meantime. So I suppose the measure of whether we've been successful is whether the client feels as though they're on the way to being able to achieve that specific goal. Some of them are a lot bigger and some of them are a lot smaller, and trying to break that down into manageable chunks to know where we're headed next. This is where we want to be in a month's time, and then reviewing that along the way to look at, is what we're doing working? Do we need to take a different approach to it? I spoke before about finding activity that's meaningful to people, and that's when people are at their kind of most consistent and they're going to get the most out of it. So trying to focus from a physiotherapy perspective, their activities on a functional activity usually has the most success, because it's something that they feel really passionate about working towards, so it makes us more successful in the treatment of that. But I'm sure from a charity perspective there's much wider things to consider.
Yeah, I think the most important thing for us as an organisation is that it really is vital that we measure the impact of our work. You know, it's important for us because of the quality of our services, and we want to make sure that we're providing a really high calibre service, but also for funding. You know, the funding landscape is really competitive now. Funders like the National Lottery, who funded our Neuro-Gym, you know, it's vital that we can prove how effective our service is. It's not good enough for us just to say this is a good service. Like, if we can't actually show how people have improved from interacting with the Brain Charity, then we won't be able to secure, you know, the funding that keeps the charity going. So we use different methods, sort of qualitative and quantitative. So we might do like a survey at the beginning of their sort of initial interaction with us, and then later down the line, so we will measure like the sort of outcomes or impacts that we've had on that person's life, you know, practical things, but also ask them how they're feeling. Is their confidence improving? How's their physical health? How's their mental health? Those sorts of things. The other thing we do that's quite nice is gather sort of case studies, and I think for us, like, lived experience and using the client's voices is really important. So rather than us saying on behalf of someone, you know, we've helped X number of people improve in X, Y, and Z, having a case study written up of a client who's accessed our services, who can talk about the benefit in their own voice, is just, yeah, much more impactful and really valuable for us.
Great, that's great. That's really good to know. And it's really nice to give people just an insight as to what you guys do within two separate roles of one really fantastic organisation. Unfortunately, we have lost Tatjana. Unfortunately, a signal over in Holland has cut short. But we are going to get into it. So we are into our quickfire questions. So the first question for you guys would be, what's your most memorable moment at the Brain Charity?
I think one of the most memorable moments from the charity this year for me was a client that was using the Neuro-Gym, who's been really dedicated and coming and exercising really regularly. Their goal was to be able to walk around Albert Docks again, which they hadn't done for well over a year, maybe even 2 years since they'd had their stroke. They've also got a child with additional needs, so that was another barrier for them getting down there. So we actually spent the morning down at Albert Docks together, practicing her walking, accessing the shops again. And it was just really special. It was really emotional for her because she hadn't been able to do that for such a long time, and really lovely to be part of that and be able to offer support to kind of, her to be able to access an area that she once spent a lot of time. So that was really lovely.
No, yeah, that's really nice. Thank you for sharing that. And then the second question would be, what's the intentions for the charity moving forward for the remainder of the year?
So the Brain Charity is soon to publish our next strategy. So that'll be 2025 to 2030. Obviously, we've had a new CEO come on board about 18 months ago. So building that strategy has been a really key part of her role. And yeah, it's really exciting. We've had a lot of sort of collaboration, bringing in staff and different departments that will be published soon. So that will really set out our vision for the next 5 years for the organisation, you know, what we're going to focus on, where we hope to get to, and otherwise just really, you know, from my perspective, the fundraising. So we have got a really ambitious target this year, you know, that we need to hit with our fundraising. So just making as many inroads on that as we can, you know, across all the different areas of fundraising, and yeah, just constantly seeking sort of new support for the charity, but also making sure that our existing supporters know how valued they are.
And leading into my next question, how can people who listen get involved with yourselves, whether it's charity work, fundraising, offering services, how can they be involved with you?
So the best thing to do is check out our website. It's just www.thebraincharity.org.uk. There's lots of information on there. There's a big yellow donate button that you can't miss if anyone would like to give us some money. There's also information about fundraising. There's lots of different challenges people can sign up to if they want to run a marathon for the Brain Charity, jump out of a plane, abseil off the side of Liverpool Cathedral, all that sort of stuff. We can arrange that. So yeah, that's probably the best thing for people to have a look at. They can also obviously check out our social media channels. So our handle is just at the Brain Charity on every channel pretty much. So even just interacting with, liking or sharing our content really does help spread the word about the work that we do. So yeah, really appreciate it.
But it sounds like we've got some opportunities to get Tatjana to jump off a building, so that sounds even better. So we'll be looking at how to get involved with that for you, not a problem. And I suppose the last question from us would be for today is, what do you hope people will get from listening to this podcast?
I think we hope that people know where to access us and where they can access support. There's such a wide range of services that the Brain Charity can offer and ways that we can help people with neurological conditions. So to know that they're not alone, there's lots of other people with similar life experience to them, and somewhere they can kind of come together, feel that community, feel that support, and get some access of our services.
Thank you very much for that. It's been honestly a privilege to talk to you both and learn more about the Brain Charity, and we're so pleased you can be our sponsor for the podcast. So thank you very much for your time, and we hope all the listeners have really enjoyed listening to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.